No.
My phone says
Okay, we're live for
we're
sure.
live. Good morning. Good morning. Good afternoon. Good evening.
Hi, everybody. Good morning. Yeah.
Cosmic time. Welcome.
I mean, really, yeah. We're representing the globe right now. Hi, everybody. This is Dr. Annalisa Durr, co-hostess of Goddess Matters. Let's see, quick bio about myself. Using goddess archetypes and goddess studies scholarship and embodiment practices, I help women go from patriarchal daughter to sovereign woman. Huzzah! Okay, and on,
Hello.
on to you, Dr. Andrea.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Dr. Andrea Slominski. I go by Dr. A. I'm a women's midlife, menopause, and postmenopause therapeutic coach, and I specialize in using archetypal and depth psychological modalities to help women cross through the changes of regency, the ages of 45 to 70.
Lovely. And now we're going to introduce our lovely guests for today. First up, we have Dr. Emma Woods. Hello, Dr. Emma.
Good morning,
Hello, good
Dr.
morning.
Hi,
Emma.
Dr. Nikki.
Thanks.
Hold on. Hold off, Dr. Nikki.
Oh no,
Um,
I'm waving to Dr. Emma.
oh, sorry, of course, of course. So Dr. Emma Woods is a trained mythologist with a PhD in mythology from a depth psychological perspective and a postgraduate degree in folklore studies. Her work explores the intersection of myth, folklore, and the human experience, with a particular interest in how stories shape cultural attitudes and beliefs. She is the co-founder and a writer for MythCrafts and the author of Bite Me, the myth of vagina dentata. And vagina there is spelled with a little at symbol. I love that. So this book examines patriarchal influence through stories that demonize women and denigrate female power. Emma is also a host of hashtag Folklore Thursday, where she helps connect and support a global community of folklore and myth enthusiasts. Through her writing and speaking engagements, Emma continues to share her passion for mythology and folklore, exploring the enduring power of stories and their impact on society. Ooh, welcome.
Thank
Yes.
you.
Yeah, and I would just like to add, Dr. Emma got up at 0 dark 30 to join us from Australia, so thank you.
I did. You should see the sunrise behind me during this talk.
Power of stories and their impact on.
Exactly. And I have the distinct honor of reintroducing to all of you Dr. Nicola Tenian, a colleague and friend, I'm happy to say. Nikki works as a grief doula and a
Fessa.
Bane Fisa. Okay, I didn't want to
Yeah.
pronounce it wrong. Um, uh, from the Irish tradition of women who work with ancestral wisdom and the unseen realms. Her work sits at the intersection of grief navigation, ancestral connection, and spiritual guidance, supporting people who are facing death, loss, or deep intuitive experiences to find trust, meaning, and connection with their ancestors. Welcome back, Dr. Nikki.
Thank you. Nice to see you all.
Nice to see you. And I just want to squeeze in here that we're actually going to be hosting Dr. Emma again, where we're going to be going in depth into her book. So just want to invite people to look forward to that as well.
That's right. And we also have a pre-recorded episode with Nikki coming up next week as well. So you'll get to get more of both of them in the next month or two. But before we dive into the topic at hand today, I just want to remind everybody to like, share, subscribe to the channel, and comment. And if you're here with us live, do engage with us. I see Zeph has already made himself present. He said good evening and good morning to everybody. Hello, Zeph. Um, I also want to let everybody know that all of the social media links for Dr. Nikki, for Dr. Emma, and Andrea and myself actually are in the YouTube show notes. So at any point now or later, you can learn more. Okay, so with that, I think we should just jump right in here. Who wants to start on the topic of male fear of female power? Who's
I,
ready to go?
I think that we should maybe it might be a good idea because we were chatting before we came live to start with some of the real deep ancient mythic and kind of maybe then come forward in culture. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. If we want to start there, let's do it. Uh, Emma, do you want to begin? I see you nodding your head.
I was just going to say, I think that that's an interesting perspective to start from because, I was digging into this a couple of months ago, and you can really see that transition, especially with women's bodies, from this attitude of awe and this awe-inspiring and, this power to this denigration and this fear. So you kind of see this transition of awe to fear as we've kind of become more modern.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. I'd like to share something that came up in my doctoral research and that I share a little bit in my book, because I was really trying to understand the shift from prehistoric menstrual reverence to menstrual stigmatization in the Western tradition. And it seemed that there was this relationship between goddess worship, especially as Maria Gimbutas, the famous archaeomythologist who really helped us understand prehistoric goddess worship in Europe and Eurasia. So she looks at, right, the goddess who was worshipped, the great goddess who was worshipped as the life-giving force, the life-sustaining force, the life-taking force. And each aspect of that was understood and revered as embodied in all aspects of nature, but like really intrinsically in the female body, especially through something very obviously like the menstrual cycle, right? Like all three of those forces are embodied. But when we get to the patriarchal period, in the Bronze Age, and we start to see these evidence of warrior mythologies, for example, that's where it's very clear, or warrior cultures in the weapons and the archaeology and the anthropology shows this very clearly. We get this reverence for these male sky god worshippers, right? And what happens is what Maria Gimbutas shares and Miriam Robbins Dexter is this clear degradation of the goddess, right? Where she's fragmented, she's no longer whole, and each of those three aspects that I just described get assigned to specific goddesses, and specifically the life-taking aspect, like Medusa. That's why we have her in the thumbnail image, right? She becomes feared and demonized. And there's something that happens, they say, in the mythological mind. What's her name? Anne Baring and Jules Cashford also say this in The Evolution of an Image. So I want to make sure I'm giving credit where credit is due. That there's a shift from seeing the world as a regenerative system to seeing death as a finality, right? So anything goddesses associated with death or menstrual blood specifically, which previously had this death regenerative quality about it, is now seen as dangerous, is now seen as a thwarting of life itself. And so the female goddesses lose the creative capacity that like goes to the male gods, where you see Zeus, for example, where he's now seen as the prime creator. Athena's birthed from his head, Dionysus from his thigh. And then you see this happening culturally too, where now women aren't the ones that possess the creative capacity, men are. And it's believed that the divine seed of life comes from the divine realm through men's semen and into women's body. And women's primary purpose is to shape and form that into a human. But they don't contribute at all to the life spark, that divine spark at all. And that's very clear in the Hippocratic corpus, and you see that I think I've argued in Mesopotamia, in the Sumerian and the Babylonian texts, and Judaism, that was the case, and in ancient Rome. So it's a very kind of clear pattern back then. So it seems that this fear of female power of life and death, like men appropriate that power and the male gods appropriate the power of life. And then where menstrual blood plays, like I said, it's like the antithesis of life, because every time a woman menstruates, that means she did not conceive with the man's divine spark of life. So it's seen as both necessary for giving life, right? Because a woman needs to menstruate in order to be able to conceive, but its reappearance means that she hasn't done her societal duty to bring a man's seed into life. So for me, what I see kind of in that Bronze Age transitional time is the male desire to possess the creative principle and the other aspects of a woman's menstrual cycle, for example, that were part and parcel to that creative journey, became fragmented and either reappropriated, or one is valorized, one is needed and necessary, and the other one becomes like stigmatized, pathologized, feared, controlled either way. There's a whole system of control around the female body. So that's where I would start. That is where I've started this conversation. That's my view.
Yeah, I think you're off and running.
Yeah. I just want to make I want to make an addendum or add on to what you said. Just
yeah,
something
of course.
briefly. But one of the things I think is a really important overarching or umbrella concept to sort of this whole takeover of matriarchal or matrifocal cultures by warrior cultures that came down from the steeps or wherever, right? Maria Gimbutas's work we're talking about here, is that looking at the matrifocal or the goddess religions in pre-Bronze Age, the divine was seen as immanent, as present in nature, right? As present in the seasons, as present in the bodies of women, as present in the bodies of animals when they brought forth life, as present in at the end of the season when you harvested and then the land went fallow and then the land became fertile again. And so these cycles of life, death, and rebirth were seen not only in the lives of women, but in the lives of the animals that they lived with and off of, right? And in somewhat in harmony with, right? And then also in the land itself, in the seasons, and in with the earth itself. And so when these warrior tribes came thundering down into these cultures, they brought with them what are called their sky gods. And this is sort of a really big shift from the immanence of the divine being in everything, the rocks, the trees, the animals, the people, the humans, that everything is connected, which now where physics is coming around to this now, right? That everything is actually interconnected, right? And that this world is somehow fallen and that we have to ascend beyond it into some mythical, literally, sacred, super sacred space with mythical beings, with enlightened beings that are in some place not here, that this is not divine, that this is to be overcome, that this is somehow fallen, that it doesn't matter how we abuse it, how we use it, how we resource it, because our we must transcend it. And so that's a complete difference in terms of how humanity looks at their place in the world, right? And looks at the role of women, right?
And I think you can't leave out capitalism in this, right? You had that sort of coming in at the same period if you go back, Marx and Engels and things, but you also had this idea of suddenly ownership of land, ownership of animals, and ownership of women. So it all sort of came in for this idea of the all-powerful, but also as being male, but also this idea of male ownership and dominance, that you got to own the land, you owned animals. And I think a lot of the respect was lost there when ownership came in.
Agreed. Totally agreed. And the ownership of women and children by a handful of men. Yeah. I mean, yeah, even this is kind of a dicey topic, but even the role of prostitution, as described by Gerda Lerner in The Creation of Patriarchy, was a byproduct of that ownership mentality in which women were classed into two different classes, which was the elite class. So, daughters passed from one man to the husband, one family to the next, or like the slaves, basically, who were passed around from man to man, or basically that men could sell their wives and their daughters into prostitution, or that was one of the only roles that, women had the option to do if they weren't owned by a man, basically.
It always makes me think as well that this doesn't happen just overnight, right? So within, moving from an indigenous animistic way of being where there's equity, and I won't say necessarily harmony, but there's kind of a synergy and an intelligence to the way in which it works. At what point does it start shifting? And then where's the tipping, like, you know, where's the tipping point? Because there has to be enough when the system changes, as we're seeing now, right? It kind of gathers speed. We're seeing a system change now, but it doesn't, just happen overnight. It didn't just happen in like 208 AD. I don't know why I'd picked that out of my head, but maybe I'll go Google that later. But it's just like, I wonder where there was the tipping point, right? But it's and then all the other, the becoming the possession for sure, right? Possessing land, possessing animals, possessing women, possessing children, the dominance over, we know what that's, right?
What's interesting too, when you think about the fact that many indigenous communities, right, um, eat, and I don't want to say the tribal name because I'm not completely sure of it, but I know that there are indigenous here in the continental U.S. There are indigenous peoples and communities who lived here with a matriarchal structure, right? Within what we would call their tribe, right? Um, at the time that the settlers were stealing their land, basically, that those
Well, I
matriarchs.
think even when you go back to European civilizations, like you have that idea of like Kariahugik, where you have, you know, everything was sort of the same. Everyone owned the same house. And so you still had that equality sort of as the start of the agricultural revolution. But I think people, as some people had more favor, amassed more, got better crops, you had this idea that um, money and wealth was all tied into divine favor still. So, the more you amassed, the more that the gods wanted you to amass. So it became this sort of tying between capitalism and religiosity where, the more you had, you didn't earn it, you deserved it.
Mm.
That's right.
Yeah, sort of the development of that Carol Chris talks about in her work, the development and ingenuity of women in the development of weaving, pottery, agriculture, animal husbandry, right? Then eventually led to kind of the birth of those ideas that Dr. Emma's talking about of amassing more than one needs, right? And then there's supply and demand, and there's a market, right, that develops, and then from there we, with the excesses and success, then the tribe grows into the town, grows into the city, grows into the nation, right? And so on and on it goes. Yeah.
Well, I
Because
wanted to, oh, go ahead, Emma, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to say, because when you go back to that division of women that Annalisa was talking about, that was very much done along, lines of wealth. I mean, it wasn't rich women getting sold off into prostitution. It was definitely the lower classes.
Yeah.
Right. I just want to read a few. The chat's really active right now, so I just want to read a few comments. To you, Nicola, or Dr. Nikki, Sonia Conrad wrote 208 AD, the rise of Septimius Servius and the conquest of Caledonia. We'll have to.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
And earlier, Zeph said Medusa's head or Gorgonian symbol is the caduceus. So Kundalini, indigenous to the old goddess religions, involves sacred sex. Absolutely. I got my Medusa hair going on for us today, representing. Anti-sex is anti-life, and denigrating women is disrespecting goddess. Yes, my man. And then, yeah, and then we have someone on here trying to troll us for peak femcel content. And I said, sometimes the truth hurts. Sorry.
Oh dear.
Sorry to interrupt the flow, but yeah, go ahead.
No, I always think it's interesting that when we do these sorts of talks, how intimidated some men are by it and how much trolling you get from it. And it's just crazy. Like, I don't think anything that we're talking about is that controversial. we're just having a discussion. We're not hating on men, but they get so intimidated by it.
Well,
Some
so
of them.
far we're talking about history, so wait till we get to our opinions
Correct.
on current stuff. Like, hold on to your socks, buddy, because
Yeah.
we haven't gotten there yet.
But isn't that just proving the point?
Yes.
that we're having a conversation about history and mythological origins, but the origins also of like the shift in society and the shift, and even that is threatening. And so, the point I was thinking that I wanted to kind of make, and I'm sure we'll get to, well, I'll just jump in now, is how this system of, and we haven't even got onto the Manosphere documentary yet on Netflix, but how this current structure and how the structure of fearing women actually is a projection on men's own vulnerability, right? And how that this need to project and kind of and have power over and dominance over beings that have emotional intelligence and connectivity and empathy and I'm not just talking life-giving wisdom, but these other kind of attributes that men are kind of then not allowed to share within this kind of warrior culture, right? Even if we think about that today, and how it's typically like within the Manosphere documentary, which I haven't watched, I'll be totally transparent about that, but I've seen it on it, that it's actually other men that are telling men how not to be, but projecting it onto women and feminism. And, so it's just this system that's eating itself. It's crazy.
I want to share. I want to share. Thank you, Dr. Nikki. I want to share something that came out this week, and apparently, I'm going to be paraphrasing. Okay, so apparently, Alex Jones. We all know who he is, the far-right conspiracy theorist. He was on a Tim Pool talk show. He was very drunk, and he made some comments about Joe Rogan, another brosphere podcaster, right? And apparently, Joe Rogan recently came out against the war or something like that. And Alex Jones, in his, slurring, delirious state, made one of the most misogynistic rants I've heard in a long time. And he was like saying something about Joe Rogan's vagina, and the great goddess, Joe Rogan's great goddess vagina, is so scared of this kind of being basically penetrated or somehow afraid of the phallic power of the Iranian regime. Like he was equating the vagina with weakness, right? And it's like time as old as tale, right? And like projecting that onto a man so that to have a vagina is weakness, and that's the greatest way to emasculate a man is equate him with the vagina, the weaker sex and the weak body part, right? Which we actually know it's not how fucking strong the vagina is. Excuse me, I'm not supposed to swear because we'll get demonetized, but it was merited this time. Or the algorithm, whatever, doesn't matter. So, the way, just to your point, the way that men gatekeep other men by
Right.
using women to effeminate other men is so gross and so prevalent.
And yet it gets projected right onto women, and the rise of like to be, I mean, this kind of ties together, right? Because with the rise of, we're talking over hundreds and thousands of years of trying to reclaim some equitable status within Western culture, within, we've talked before about when were women allowed to get divorced, when was rape criminalized within marriage, when were women able to get credit cards, we've talked about that, why women stayed, and this kind of very I've completely lost my train of thought.
We were talking about reclaiming some sense of equitability in the culture, like over thousands of years, for women to claim
it's
equity.
very recent. It's in the last,
In the last
it's literally in the last 50 years. I
in the
mean,
last 120 years, right? Since 1900, right? We had the, well, you ladies know, I talk about the return and the rise of the feminine since the beginning of the 20th century with the birth of what we call modern psychology, with the birth of the women's rights movements and suffrage, right? And then we go through, the right to vote, and we come on up through the feminist movement, the goddess movement, the women's spirituality movement, through the 1960s, the 70s, the 80s, right? So, yeah, it's feminism has become such that poor term is bloodied and beat up and hiding in the corner because it's been so misused. The whole idea of feminism as not being man hating, it's not misandry, it's just about wanting equal footing, just about wanting equal rights, letting a woman choose what she wants to do. If she wants to be a stay-at-home mom, she should be a stay-at-home mom. If she wants to work, she should work. If she wants to own a farm, she should own a farm. If she wants to be a writer, she should be a writer. If she wants to do, and just in terms of equal pay for equal work, we haven't even gotten there yet, right? So it's really, in the sense of it being a movement to just bring us together on equal footing, right?
I think we can see something massively shifting. We all know there's something, I called it the great unraveling. Joanna Macy's called it the great turning. It's like the great shift, right? It's almost like this massive realignment, and the more we can see what's happening and the rise in even more intensely the fear men have of women's, not all men, men in power, by the tightening and restriction on women's rights, especially in the USA, especially in the USA.
In the freest nation in the world? For who?
Yeah.
Yeah.
When the United Nations just had a vote on women's rights, and I think there were 37 countries that voted for women's rights. Why are we even doing that in 2026? And one nation voted against it, which was the USA.
Yeah, right, exactly.
So what, if we're the subject is, male fear of female power, where are we in this? Right? What is the
I wonder, because it's really easy to talk about this from a socio, political perspective, but what is the role of the goddess right now? What is the role of the goddess in terms of understanding this theme, male fear of female power, and how we address it? How can we use the goddesses to address this crisis? Because it is a crisis, right? Because we also see, I mean, Andre and I, we all talk about this, I know we do, in Afghanistan, like the increasing curtailing of women's rights that were worse than they were in the previous time the Taliban, controlled the area. I mean, femicide rates are high all over the world. I mean, it's just the snuff films and the stuff that's coming out about these elite networks abusing children and women and some men too. I mean, it's just, it's been there for a long time. We're now seeing all of it, but it also seems to be intensifying. So what is the role of the goddess right now, or sacred feminism, as Sally Kempton calls it?
I think we need to move
go
away
ahead.
from
No,
this.
go ahead, Emma. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, because you see this commercialization of relationships as well, right? It's you rate people on a scale. Do they belong together? Like, there's attractiveness, there's wealth, there's all these things that come into these power dynamics. And I think that we've forgotten that relationships are really about just finding a middle ground with someone and helping each other. It's not about dominating each other. And this dominator model of the dominating male has just infested our relationships to a point that you have people on one hand being angry that they're not getting the woman that they deserve, but they're not understanding that if you treat someone like garbage, you're not going to have a real relationship. And it's finding that middle ground of how to respect each other and nurture each other and all those sorts of embodiments that the goddess has, in bringing those back into relationships and creating a relationship that is mutually beneficial, that doesn't have this power structure in it. Because if you don't have equality in a relationship, you don't have a relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's
Right.
interesting that it brings just to throw another thing out there, which we may want to talk about or not, but is when you're talking about communication and relationship and being able to develop a relationship between two people and being able to support each other and help each other, right? The starting with millennials and Gen X and Gen Z and everybody coming up, they're becoming more and more fractured, more and more distance from each other because of technology, right? And so some of these skills, I mean, when I was teaching college, I mean, some of these skills, these young people, they're intelligent, they're dynamic, they're creative, and they don't know they don't know how to talk to another person in person. They don't the communication skills, the basic skills of navigating, moving through the world in relationship to other human beings, right, are becoming fractured into 6-second digital imagery. And so I think I'm old, so but for me, I think that the power of the goddess is in each individual's relationship to that spiritual essence, whatever you want to call it, and then how that informs how we move through the world and how we relate to others.
Yeah. Nikki, did you have something else you wanted to share?
Not at the sec. Let me think
Okay.
of it.
Okay. Well, let me just check in with the chat here. Medici, okay. I'm sorry, I can't get your handle, but he says we need Morgan on our side with this one, but Morgan is not a favor of Trump. He also says later, Lilith was the first one that was supposed to have equal footing. Yes. Yes, she was. He's a male witch here and fully believe male and female are equals. Zeph said something about that. I can't understand what's so bad about equality. And Medicine Eagle also says, well, Taliban are no different than the Christian Taliban. That's true. We see
Right.
in our own country. So I'm really like, it's really meaningful to have some like, open-minded men here in the chat too, just sharing their voices, because obviously we don't have any men represented here.
Well,
I
we
think
can't
what I
form
was
a
going to
stable
say,
about men. Yeah. So
sorry, what I was going to say was about equality, and when there's such a power imbalance, and I see this being part of the LGBT community, is that people who have the power, and this came up many years ago in an undergrad class, and we were looking at studying like equality, equity. And this was way before the United States, Australia, Ireland had same-sex marriage equality. I had same-sex marriage equality in the Netherlands because that's where I was married in 2003. And people in the class were saying to me, well, I would give up some of my rights for you to have the same rights as me. And that showed me that people don't understand, even in that or in this situation about female equitable kind of status. Men think they have to give something up.
Right.
Or so I think there's a kind of real thought, a paradigm shift that needs to happen in thinking, which I think underlies a lot of fear, right, towards women, is that people think they have to give something up in order for a woman to be equal to them. And what is it that they have to give up? In this situation, or the example I'm using, it was, around hospital visitation for heterosexual couples versus same-sex couples, all sorts of kind of, just social rights. And I was like, but what rights would you give up? It doesn't kind of make sense. But I can see a parallel in this subject also. I think a lot of men feel like they have to give something up in order for women to be equal, and they're not willing to give it up, even if it's, and not realizing what they have to give up is a false notion of dominance or something, right? It's something in
Or a
that.
false notion of sacrifice. I mean, the Christian right is taking and rebranding feminism as evil. There was a huge New York Times interview just recently, saying that feminism broke the workplace, that it brought wokeness into the workplace, and that feminism, is the reason, is the reason behind all of these troubles, and that there needs to be a neo-feminism, there needs to be a conservative feminism. And I'm like, oh my God, like, I just, it's giving someone their freedom to make a choice in their life, as long as it's not harming or directly affecting your life, affects you not at all, right? It affects you not at all. So, I mean, there's so many articles, there's so many, I mean, people can do their own research, do it on Google Scholar, do it on Google, do it wherever you want. Don't ask GPT, because, they hallucinate
Right,
60% of the time, whatever. But,
right.
on what society loses when women aren't allowed to be in leadership positions, innovation positions, creativity positions, right? Right. In all parts of culture, from business to the arts to industry to politics to diplomacy to, I mean, on and on.
You know, one of the issues that I have, and I see other women discussing this as well, is that in our quest for equal rights, there hasn't been a full-blown effort to also bring like feminine qualities, what we might call feminine qualities, intuition, relationality, to the work. Like, part of creating that equality is actually allowing these feminine qualities to help guide and restructure our society. Because in my view, we will never have equal rights, none of us, in a hierarchical, capitalistic, patriarchal society. In my view, it has to all be torn down and recreated afresh in something that is born of complementary male-female, like something that's more like yin and yang, right? So what we're talking about are only like little band-aids to help us along the way, but we will never have what we want in this system, because the system is inherently flawed and broken and patriarchal.
But it's consuming itself.
Thank God.
So the warrior culture is actually killing itself and the system. That's what we're seeing in the dying throes of a system that has consumed too much. The kind of need to dominate, the need to have power over, the need to consume more than there is, to, kind of stockpile wealth, stockpile women, stockpile children. It's consuming itself,
Yeah.
right? And so and it's only served still the elite. I would say most men are not in the 1%. Yes, there's privilege, but there is just inherent privilege of being, but I don't think they're not in the same privilege as we're talking about gatekeeping. And so that system it's over consumed, and it's consuming itself right now. So I think you're in your very early stages of getting your wish.
Yeah.
Lisa.
Yes. I don't see it happening in our lifetime, but I
I
do
do.
have. Oh,
I do.
You do?
Oh, I absolutely, yes, I do. I do think this is what the great turning, great unraveling is about.
I hope so. I hope so, or at least we can see pockets of it. I'd like to see at least pockets of it. And the seeds. I see us at least planting the seeds. And
So if we come back to the goddess, right, and we come back to the regenerative nature, then everything has its season. and everything has its time, and everything must die in order to go through a fallow phase before it is reborn.
Hmm.
And we're watching it slowly,
Die,
slowly
decay.
croak itself.
Yeah.
It's not in decaying yet, but
Okay,
it's
we're not in the decay yet.
not in decay yet. We're in the definitely in the dying phase. I think, anyway, that's just my opinion.
Definitely. I just kind of see it as a longer trajectory where I guess like my long-term vision that I see is like us going back to living in like 140 to 160 people communities, since that's what I read once. Anthropologists said like the average human community can realistically sustain itself in those smaller pods. Living off the land, living maybe in like um, what the Iroquois had, the Iroquois Federation, and then they had like little satellite tribes, if you will. Like that's kind of see where humanity is going. I'm just not sure if big empires like America would give up that, you know, nationalistic power to allow us to live in those little pods.
Well, not just nationalistic power, but look where industry and AI and the military industrial complex, and I mean, in order to end up living in those micro communities, either individuals are going to have to start their own micro communities and live off grid or develop their own grid or whatever it is. But um, for everyone to live that way, I think we'd have to go through some sort of a global collapse. I think I just don't, you know. Nikki's like, yup.
I think it's coming. I think we see it now with oil prices. Australian gas petrol prices have just gone up 39%. You know,
39%.
Boston was talking about not, restricting car usage, right? And there's a lot of talk around this. Like if we don't have an infrastructure, we're going to find out very quickly.
I think the problem is though, as you expose these vulnerabilities, people just get angrier, and that's where you get caught in this vicious cycle. As people feel more vulnerable, they get so much more angry, and they try to have more control. So I think we're
Correct.
going to see that acceleration of that, and then
I
then probably you'll collapse.
I agree.
I
And
I feel kind of like I'm like laughing about it. It's like the laughter and the tears are like happening at the same time. Sorry, Nikki, go ahead.
I was just going to say I had a comment from the chat, if I
Oh
may.
yeah, yeah.
That men, this is from Bridget. Men and straight people don't want to give up privilege, and that's it. That's why they can't see it, which is true. I guess that's what I was trying to say, is that when you have it and you don't want to give it up, of course you can't see that you already have it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you read that comment again, please?
Men and straight people don't want to give up privilege, and that's why they can't see it. And it being that there is already privilege.
Mm.
They have privilege. I won't say for everybody, right? But just we already know that, that's
That's
that's another
yeah,
part. That's another
it is. This is why I'm like,
series.
we have to restructure society where nobody has privilege. I mean, where everybody has like equal stake in their community and has intrinsic value and is born and raised to understand what their role and relationship is to themselves and one another, and to root out even the concept of privilege so it doesn't even exist.
I
But
think we're a ways off that,
yeah.
but we in our lifetime we will start really seeing, and I think I've said before in another interview, I do think we'll start seeing massive change soon, but within 20 years we're
Mm,
going to be living in a very different world than we are now. And I think then, as it relates to the goddess, there are many faces to the goddess, as we know. So who is needed right now? What dimension of the goddess and feminine is needed now? And I don't think it's singular like the monotheistic sky gods.
right.
I think there is.
And that's probably why we're seeing, correct, I mean, jump in here, like we're seeing the rise of figures like Kali or the Morrigan in this collective psyche, I should say that. since they've always been there. Medusa has been coming up a lot in the culture because there is this maybe this unconscious desire for the rage to see it, to face it, to burn it down, to tear through it, to scream about it. And somehow we've created a space where we can do that, where we're not going to necessarily, oh my God, knock on wood, get burned at the stake for doing that.
Or
I don't want to
pathologized.
call anything into being.
Or pathologized, right? That's the
Right,
modern burning at the stake.
right,
Right.
right, right. But I think also what you just said or suggested is that there are goddesses other than that too that are needed right now. Maybe the ones that help us with the reconstruction or, nurture us while we're going through this rage. Um, help Athena, help us strategize, help us like move through this
Right.
with precision and, using reason, maybe the feminine aspect of reason, whatever that might be.
Being
Well, I think
in the States, I'd be interested in knowing sort of how this seems to be presenting maybe in British, culture and also in Australian culture, if there's, if the mythologies that have been there for centuries are welling up, right, within the people groups there.
Dr. Emma, what are you seeing in Oz?
I was going to say, I think, obviously in Australia, thankfully, we're starting to see a lot more recognition of Indigenous culture and just understanding that we don't own the land, that colonization doesn't own the land, that we have acknowledgement of country in most places, and that understanding that the land itself has agency, and that it doesn't belong to white settlers. And I think, but again, with everything that you move forward with progression, there's also always backlash.
Mm-hmm.
I love this idea of the land having agency too. That's a really powerful. I'm going to say idea, although it's a living quality, it's a living presence, even though I'm holding it in the realm of idea right now. Thank you for bringing that in.
But that's also happening in New Zealand, right? Wasn't there a case where it went to court where I'm going to say either a river, it was a body of water having autonomy and therefore legal rights. So,
Wow.
that's very slow happening though, I would say.
The sovereignty of the land, I know, has always been a strong theme for you, Nikki.
Yeah, it has.
Dr. Nikki.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
And
I think we live in a world where, you constantly have natural disasters, and we see the power of the world and why we keep being ignorant to it. You see a lot of backlash against even climate change. Like, I before this I was living in Oklahoma, and we got more tornadoes every year and more destruction every year. And there's just this idea that, because it was a global warming misnomer, well, it's not getting hotter, so therefore, there's a lack of understanding of the nuances of things, and that it's climate change. It's not just one thing. But it's undeniable that you see so many more natural disasters. And when we're going to admit that we are smaller than nature, I think is when we really start to heal.
And that then ties back, right? It ties back to this fear of men's fear of women, but it's also men's fear of the power and man's fear of the power of nature, right? And that whole like, well, what will happen with we've got to protect the earth, we've got to save the earth, we've got to this, the earth. The earth is more than capable of creating homeostasis or trying to keep creating homeostasis. We've got to worry about human beings on the planet and, the plant life on the planet and animals on the planet. The planet's going to do what the planet's going to do. right?
Yeah. You talk about privilege. We as human beings act like the privileged species, right? We have
Yes, we
so
do.
much disregard for the rest of the life on this planet. Yeah,
And
we
that's,
have.
I think, when it became a one singular sky god in the monotheistic traditions, or the warrior gods that we, I mean, and this is all connected, right? And this is where we've seen dominance over land, dominance over women. There's no disconnect. They're connected, intimately connected.
Right.
If we
And
go
yeah,
back to the goddess, though, do you think there's also that change in, you know, goddess spirituality was, the birth of the world, like the world was birthed into being as opposed to manually created into being.
right.
Hmm.
We
Yeah,
have
there's,
there's a comment saying, fascinating, this discussion is happening during Navaratri,
oh, it is.
the mother
That's
divine of
true.
the universe, right?
I've been doing meditations every day.
Yeah.
No, yeah. Oh, thank you for sharing that. Whoever.
I know we
Yeah.
only have a few minutes left, but I kind of like to bring the conversation a little bit forward in terms of looking at how this centuries, maybe not eons, but thousands of years of living under patriarchy, and then what we're looking at now culturally in the fear of women, which is manifesting as violence against women, right? Which is manifesting as um, social, political, and physical violence in our culture, right?
I want to say one thing, and this is really opening up a can of worms and deserves its own discussion, but I think it's also, at least it bears speaking, and that is that we also as women need, yes, need to start coming to terms with or recognizing and healing from the patriarchy that lives inside of us.
Mm-hmm.
Because we will not be able to fix this quagmire if we don't also reckon with that in ourselves and and how we treat other women based on that internalization of these and the planet. We're also perpetrators of violence against the planet, and other women, even if we don't mean to be, in kind of indirect ways. Um, so I think so the onus isn't only on men, even though we're talking about male fear of female power, and women can also enculturate men into fearing other women, like if they're also brainwashed by the methods and ideas of the culture. So that's a thread too. Don't know if anyone.
Absolutely. And I think that's the thing. We have to do our work, right? And look at our own internal uh, misogyny and
Yeah.
and look at where we have fallen into the trap of the system of dividing and separating ourselves from other women, seeing other women as competition, seeing other women as a threat. I mean, it's within the same sphere. It's essential work.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think we also need to sort of, I love to see the sort of dismantling of these two main gender norms, because I think that has got us into so much trouble as well, and it's always difficult when you have a discussion about, female power or the male fear of female power, is that not things aren't black and white, right? And when you talk about people and things, I mean, there's not great people of both sexes, and it doesn't always tie into your gender and things. It's just that unfortunately there are good people and there are selfish people, and that is not divided by gender spectrums. And I think dismantling some of these ideas of gender, and just, you can't have equality when you have two categories.
Mm, that's right. Because everything exists
I
within. Wait, what?
said what she said.
Yeah. Because it all exists within the yin yang. All the possibilities exist within that spectrum. Or the big cosmic yoni. Kali's big cosmic yoni. It
Exactly.
all exists inside that.
And we've separated all these qualities into this is a male quality and it's good if
Right.
you're a male, but it's bad if you're a female.
Right.
And, you know, we should just have good qualities and bad qualities, and everyone should just be striving towards good qualities. And, you know, everybody has strengths and weaknesses, and we just need to understand that we're all unique individuals, and we should, if we all play to our strengths and we all cooperated, we wouldn't have these problems. And that's where the dominator model needs to go.
That's what the essential nature of being in community, and kind of busting this myth of like we have to have a house with a white picket fence and everybody ends up on the debt ladder, instead of working in community, living together communally, sharing. And to your point, Dr. Emma, we all have strengths and weaknesses. And this kind of fallacy that we all have to be good at every single thing, to individuate means to grow up, means we have to do every single thing. Total bullshit. Am I allowed to say that? I just said it.
You said it. I don't care. We said this was going to be no holds barred, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. We did. Yeah, we did.
Did we? I'm sorry, Andrea, I know that you posed a question and I feel like I derailed us a little bit. Was there anything else you wanted to say about that?
No, I just said, we were sort of, we started by starting about the deep history of
Mhm.
of the beginnings of male fear of female power, looking at the mythological roots of it. And then I was saying to come back, at the end, to how we see it, being sort of present in culture. And, we've talked about a little bit about the fear of feminism, I guess, the, the fear of alternatively expanding gendered norms, right? And why, and that's threatening to a lot of people. Looking at the people like Andrew Tate and the other, like in the manosphere, talking about all of the traditionally held attributes of the feminine, right, as being weak or not, that's not something anyone should wish to have in their psychic makeup, right? But
Yeah.
ultimately, I mean, men and women both have the archetypal masculine and the archetypal feminine, right? Within, potentially in equal measures within everyone. So I just think it's interesting to, um, and unfortunately somewhat dangerous. I mean, right now, I mean, women, we are losing bodily autonomy in the United States. I mean, we're not talking about ideas. We're not talking about like, oh, wouldn't it be good if? We're talking about women dying from not receiving medical treatment that they need, right? Because doctors are afraid of getting sued because they're performing an abortion, or even if the fetus is, not viable, or whatever the medical emergencies. I mean, there's a long list of them. You just Google it, right? So, so in that sense of, looking at the resurgence and rise of the feminine and the resistance of the patriarchal forces, right? I mean, we're looking at a battle of really of very huge energetic forces in the shadow and in the collective unconscious. And it's in order to move into something new, something balanced, which is ideal, which is what we have to have for sustainability. um, I think there's going to be a lot of rough road to come.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we are technically at time. Do you two actually have like an extra 5 minutes, or do you need a tight ending? Are you okay? Something that I meant to bring up earlier, and I'll just bring it up now, is I've heard many men, I'm going to be very specific here in a moment though, describe something along these lines. So a very well-known, internationally well-known Greek politician named Yanis Varoufakis has come out more recently and said that in his own experience and more broadly in his culture, and I would say all patriarchal cultures, men are raised to see being female as a weakness. Men are raised to see women as not fully human. Men are raised, I'm paraphrasing, I can't remember exactly what he said, but to not to see women more as object instead of subject, instead of their subjectivity, right? Another Greek friend said something similar to me, that men are taught not to respect women. My response to him was like, I'd rather have a man hate me than not respect me, like not respect my humanity, right? I'd rather have you hate me. And so I think that there's something fundamentally wrong in how we allow women to be treated as the weaker sex, like that's still part of the training, and also as objects, like male, normal human being, woman, secondary sex, object of male, male desire. That's another area, right, where men are the fear of female power is the sexual power that we allegedly have over many men. But it's a projected fear, right? We just are being ourselves, and then that gets projected to control us because they're afraid of their own weak, inability to control themselves in relationship too. This is another big topic. So, but I thought it was at least worth bringing in because some men are speaking publicly about these things.
Yeah, so you've got men like that are speaking, and then you've got men like Andrew Tate,
Right.
right? There is this kind of, there's a lot of work. There's a lot of work for all of us to do, but a lot of work. That's a lot of centuries of unpacking where we, have inherited our cultural norms, right? And for those, I think there's a lot of us who are starting to dismantle those, starting to question those, starting to really look at, why and how those have impacted all women and all men, right? And all humans. I'm just going to say that.
Yeah.
Well, I think when you go, you brought up that Manosphere documentary earlier, and when you watch that, it's so interesting to see Louis Theroux. He was so the antithesis of the masculine, and watching him just expose these masculine men as so weak and so hollow and so empty, but also so scared. Like,
Yeah.
they're afraid of him. They're afraid of their mothers. They're living in this fear, and what they've constructed is just so empty and hollow. And it must be awful to not understand that someone could love you for your own authentic self, for that to be such a concept that you can't even consider.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really sad. I mean, I think now we're starting to get some really deep fundamental, like the intrinsic value of life itself, right? Like who and what has intrinsic value? I mean, I would say everything, but there's like a hierarchy of that in our culture.
Well, I think I think the most of the change, and I know there's a tipping point. So because I know it's never going to be 100% at one time, right? In changing thought forms and consciousness. But we have to get to the point where enough people either recognize and want to facilitate the change that needs to happen, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I there's just such polarization that's increasing around these issues. And if we want to go all the way out to the incel and all these, the 4B and all these different movements, right, around the world in terms of ways of thinking about life and sexuality and culture and marriage or not and relationship or not, and man to woman, that kind of a thing.
But the
I
tipping
don't know
point is
how much
only
tension. I don't know how
3%.
much. Go ahead, Nikki. What?
The tipping point is only 3%.
Yeah,
The tipping point isn't 51%.
yeah, yeah. Well,
Mm.
that's hopeful.
Right? So it's when we think about that to your point, the tipping point, if we realize how much power we have, if we realize how much power we have, and then if we realize how much power 3% of us have,
Mhm.
things will change very, very quickly. That's the tipping point. It's 3%.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it doesn't seem so impossible when, we're not thinking 51, 60% needs to change, right? It's only 1% who has 99% of the power at the moment, but it's only 3% of the population, or to any population it takes to actually transform it and create that paradigm shift.
I think that's a really good place to like kind of, round off our conversation on a hopeful note there. But I want to invite Emma, if you have any last words that you'd like to share, or Dr. Andrea, if you have anything else you'd like to share, or Nicola, Dr. Nicola.
I'd like to hand it over to Emma and Dr. Emma and Dr. Nicola, right?
I am definitely still hopeful about the future. I think that the way to dismantle the patriarchy is not to use force and dominance, but education, empathy, and understanding. And I think that they are the modalities that I'm going to continue my work in.
Yeah.
This has been really great. I'm sorry, Nicola, did you want to say anything else? Okay, just wanted to check. Dr. Nicola, sorry, I'm trying to get in the habit of calling everybody doctor. Everybody's doctor or nobody's doctor. And let me just read Sonia's Conrad's comment. She said, "Thank you for this chat. We must love ourselves so our heart is open to loving others without fear. Deeply grateful for all of you, ladies, and sharing your knowledge and thoughts on the subject." Thank you, Sonia. And everybody else who's contributed, even if you're contributing conflictual comments, that's part of the conversation. So I'm going to remind everybody that to leave comments, to share this chat with other people, to subscribe to the channel. Let us know if you have any other ideas you'd like us to discuss in the future. We're open to those ideas. And what else? All of our information, especially Dr. Nikki and Dr. Emma's information, it's in the YouTube show notes. You can learn more about their work, how you can work with them, how you can read their work, et cetera, et cetera. And also Dr. Andrea, she works with midlife women, as we already talked about earlier. I guess that's it. Should we sign off? I want to keep going. That's why I'm having a hard time.
Thank you so much, ladies, for representing the rest of the globe. It was a treat, as always, to spend time with you.
A real treat. Thank you.
Thank you.
And an honor. Thank
you.
you so much. Yeah. All right. So everybody at home, thank you so much. And we'll see you next Wednesday. I forget the name of the topic, but it's our conversation with Dr. Nikki. Yeah. Okay. All right. See everyone next week. Ciao.
Bye-bye.
Bye.